So we're live at Speaker's Corner. As you know, yesterday, or many of you might know, yesterday there was an incident at Speaker's Corner and my good friend and comrade Piers Corbyn was arrested. We have slightly different perspectives, or quite different perspectives, on the issue of Covid-19, but I have the view, and I've always had the view, as a consequence of being at Speaker's Corner for more than 40 years, 1986, or whatever many years, 30 times many years, 1986 I started speaking at Speaker's Corner. And what you learn at Speaker's Corner is many different points of view, from religious to flat earthers to lesbian promoters to anarchists and everybody has a point of view, and sometimes some of the religious people, they will say something to me that is correct vis-a-vis me. Other times, I'll say something when I'm thinking I'm saying the right thing and I'll find out I've said something wrong. So I have no objection to speakers making comments and making speeches on issues and with viewpoints that differ to me. So that's why I invited Piers to come and join us today, so that we can have a debate about these issues. Because since the COVID thing started out, we've actually not been able to debate. I've always had a different position on him on some of these questions, but I welcome him and you'll see us challenge and debate these issues together today. Okay, Piers, would you like to say, firstly, what happened yesterday?
Well, yesterday we had 300 people here demonstrating. I made about a 7-minute speech, and the police attempted to stop me, and I refused to stop, and then they arrested me and took me away to Holborn Police Station. And the outcome of it was there was actually no charges at this point, but they say they're looking into it. I think they've made no charges at this point because they know that they're on very dodgy ground. I think a general point about what happened yesterday, though, is it's a big attack on the right to associate. You see, this is Speaker's Corner English, where historically it's been a symbol of free speech, and the police were here in great numbers, and they arrested about 20 people.
Okay, originally though it appeared, because I did liaise with the police about this in advance of this, originally it appeared that Jaden Franson, who's like a sort of, used to be a leading light in Britain First, that she had called the demonstration. The indicator for that was that the UK freedom movement was a company registered by Franson on the 20th of April. So it's just too coincidental for me to think that. Having said that, it appears that they bottled out and you sort of jumped on their back.
It was promoted by, you see, that story was put around by the media to try and make anyone who
well, no, I put that story around as well.
It was also went in the semi-mainstream media.
Yeah.
So the consequence was that we were being labelled as right-wing, and people were saying, "Oh, Piers, I don't know if I can come because they don't want to mix up with them."
Well, if it would have been a day like, for example, if it would have been today, there's already groups of people gathering at Speaker's Corner now, talking. The people who normally come to Speaker's Corner, they're all observing some of this. Very little. There's no difference between the way they're standing, the people talking here, for example, if you look over here, and the people at the Speaker's Corner cafe, or for example, people get in a bus or in the tube or something like that. So I fully agree that you should be able to gather and discuss and debate, given the circumstances.
It's an attack on civil liberties. The whole COVID thing is an attack on civil liberties, on culture, on the right to associate. And the police, of course, don't obviously believe in distancing themselves because there was at least 100 police here yesterday. 30 of them very close together, taking me away.
I did look at that, and I must admit that when looking around at the film from RT yesterday of the live events, it is perfectly true that when the police were discussing with people, it's not like we're standing next to each other, we're talking that way, but they were gathered in groups around each other, straight in each other's faces.
Have a look on videos.
No, that's right. And so the argument.
Piers
but this is one of the wider issues, though. That is, it's basically the police haven't been given any training, or whatever training they've been given has been false. Because the British government, for example, has argued until Wednesday last week, the British government argued consistently that there was no purpose in wearing a mask.
Yeah.
And
Well,
they've-
in
and
my
they've-
view, there isn't any purpose in wearing a mask. In fact, it's a symbol of self-oppression. I mean, it's a complete madness thing. The thing
Why
about
is it
bosses,
madness? Why is it madness?
well, because we exist to breathe in a normal way like with mouths.
Yes,
If you put a mask on, no, it's like, you see that fence, it's like using that fence to stop flies
No, it's
going
not.
through it.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
It is. And, well, viruses are very small, that's the
Yes,
first thing.
yes.
And secondly, when you're wearing a mask anyway, you're trying to, when you breathe out, it's because your body wants to breathe something out. The stuff you want to breathe out, a lot of it gets stuck in the mask, and then you can re-inhale it, which is not healthy either.
Well, I mean,
And
that's that Dolores Cahill coming out of you. I watched
Who's
her,
that? I don't
the
know.
one that you mentioned, the Irish freedom movement woman.
Well, that isn't why
Well, let me respond to that first of all. Right, I wear this mask when I go into, and I bought these masks
I don't wear
when the
masks
thing started,
anyway.
right? But I've told you that I was wearing masks. I told you
I know.
that I think you should wear masks. I wear the mask when I enter into an environment where it is possible to pass the virus reasonably easily. So in a supermarket, in transport, I haven't
you
got
ought
on
to do
transport
this
for
every
weeks.
year then, because we have a flu thing
No.
every year, and this one is less of a normal flu season.
Actually, I'm sorry.
Number.
I'm sorry, what are you talking about?
The total number of people now with COVID is less than you have. I mean, this March
but
to
a
April,
normal flu, a normal flu.
January to April, there's less people got COVID than in a normal flu.
In a normal flu season, firstly, flu is not what this is. This is a new type of virus that, if you want to dispute that, I don't mind disputing
Well,
that.
it-
Hang on,
there's
one
something
minute.
different about it.
There's a new type of virus with particular characteristics to it in those people who suffer from the COVID disease. Yeah? So the SARS-2 virus is a new virus, zoonotic in origin, which hits in particular, generally hits, both lungs and causes a sort of blast-like effect in the lungs. What?
It's a blood disorder. It's not a pneumonia. It's a blood disorder, and that's why it affects a lot of organs, but always both COVID. Always
It's not
both.
always both lungs, actually, no. Because some people
Well,
get the
some people
cytokines
might get
stored.
actual normal pneumonia anyway, but this thing
A lot of people do
is
get
both
pneumonia from it.
lungs.
Yeah. So the issue is,
Whereas often normal pneumonia is just one.
because we do not have a vaccine and there's no immunity to it within society, that's why everything's happening. At least you know that's the official position. That's why everything's happening. So why are you saying everything's happening?
Well, there are motives behind what people want to get out of it, if you like. And
That's not
we'll-
the same
we'll
thing,
run
but
through
anyway, all
those.
right.
Well, there is.
I don't mind dealing with motives as to what's happened since.
Right.
But
Yeah,
what are you saying? This is what I heard yesterday, and I've heard a lot of other people say that the whole virus thing is a complete fake. Is that what you're saying?
No, there is a virus, but what we're told is a pack of lies in terms of danger. And I'll go through just some very simple points. First of all, about the data and what it's used to do. It's used to scare people all the time. Now, the data itself is, arbitrarily adjustable by the guidance given or not given to NHS and so on and doctors as to whether they say someone's got COVID or not. Recently they've been saying, oh, just stick down COVID, and that's what's been happening in a big way.
No, but I said to you a minute ago, so just
Well,
to repeat,
yeah,
one sec.
maybe 25% wrong on that, but it's a
In
bit
Hamburg, pathologists investigated the deaths recorded as COVID deaths.
Yeah.
And in Germany, there's been the strongest case for this because in Germany they've got a very strong health system. And they found that 25% of the people who were registered as dying from COVID had died with COVID.
Yeah.
So 25%, you could say on that assumption, there's only one case study, but it's a clinical study, that 25% of those who've died, officially recorded as COVID deaths, are with COVID rather than from COVID. I'd accept that.
Yeah.
But for example, I saw
that's a big number.
Elon Musk the other day turning around and saying, because he wants to open his factory again, and he was saying, if you get killed, if you get run over by a bus, they say you've got COVID. That's not true. That's not true. That's not the method used to assess whether someone has died from it. And then the other side to it is, in Britain in particular, there are also large numbers of people who have died from COVID, but have died in circumstances where no one's actually recording properly what the cause of death is. You know, care homes or people at home.
Well, absolutely.
So that's another side.
Which Sir Patrick Vallance said that. He said, if someone's died of COVID, it doesn't mean they died of COVID. And if someone's tested positive, it doesn't mean they haven't. Because the testing is often just for any, well, it is for any type of coronavirus.
No, they're too specific for that. Initially, I know you.
That's what they have reported. This is what the government.
There's a guy called.
Both those statements are from government reports. You know, when they have those weekly.
That's pushing it because basically these guys are standing up there like a bunch of goons, spouting off the stuff they spout off, which is disgusting. I agree, and that's why we need. That's why, like I said, I do not agree with you about the emphasis you put on this, but nevertheless, I agree. You've got the right to say what you've got to say. I think even David Icke's got the right to say what he says, because otherwise you end up, you know, there would be no speaker's corner if everyone has to say what official lines are. And when they say, I agree fully that when they say we are guided by the science, they're really talking out their backsides. Because there is, and then they say by British science.
Well,
you know.
Well, that's ridiculous.
No, exactly.
Neil Ferguson's stuff turned out to be either a nonsense or gross overestimate, whatever you want to say.
Wait. You mean in swine flu?
No, well, there's those issues too, but the recent documents, he's also made big mistakes on previous things, yes. But the Imperial College document, I suggest, was essentially written because the government wanted it to say that, or somebody wanted it to say that.
Well, I think it
turned out to be completely.
I think there were different factions within the government. We've had a reflection of that here. The first issue was Boris Johnson said on the 2nd or 3rd of February at a keynote speech he made at that time about the future of Brexit. And there he said, I don't know if you've seen the video, he said, one country will stand up to this coronavirus tyranny, and it will be Britain. And then he pulled a Churchillian pose, and he says, puts his hand in his pocket. He goes, and like Clark Kent will climb into the telephone box and emerge as a defender of free trade between nations around the world. And that's what lay behind the infections pouring into this country uncontrolled through the borders, which was the exact opposite. Imagine the insanity of it. On the 31st of January, Brexit was declared, and I know you're a Brexiteer, I'm not, but Brexit was declared, and then they just let the people pour in with the disease.
It made no sense, because they wanted Brexit to control borders, and chose not to control the borders.
Yeah, I mean, but then he was presenting it as free trade, you see. So there was one faction, and then he also made this famous statement where he said, you know, you could take it on the chin and let it move through the population. So that was Cummings and herd immunity, and they seem to have been linked to the Oxford University study that claimed that perhaps half the population had already been infected. Right? Because that would have backed up their theoretical framework of allowing everything to go on, do a Swedish model. Right? But I mean, the Swedish model a bit different because you've got 60% of the population of Sweden live alone. You know what I mean? We live in very tight conurbations. Well, same population in London as the whole of Sweden.
There's a whole lot of countries that didn't have social distancing. But some of the reason for them having less is because the counting is different. Here the government is telling the NHS to encourage numbers. Probably in Sweden they're discouraging numbers. And maybe in South Korea. I don't know.
I wouldn't go as far.
They might be equally honest, in which case there's no evidence that social distancing has worked. No evidence in any case.
I don't agree. I mean, I think you do it two ways. Right?
Look at
it two ways. One is, in order to totally eradicate the virus across the world, that you don't know this virus. Say a virus comes. Hang on.
Totally eradicate the flu virus.
I haven't finished the sentence yet. No, that's a new virus. Right? Well, SARS was eradicated.
Yeah.
Right? SARS-1 was eradicated. Right? Now, SARS-2 appeared in China without anybody knowing what the consequences would be. So when it first emerged, how do you think the Chinese could respond? Well, in my opinion, they had, well, the option they took, I think, was the right option. And that was clamp down, lock down, kill him. And to be fair to the Chinese, they've got like a handful of cases every day now.
Yeah.
So in a quarter of the world, interconnected across the single country with no internal borders,
No.
how could they possibly, they could have had Steve Bannon on the 23rd of February on his TV show called Pandemic War Room. He said, and this was part of the game, he said, the Chinese have now locked down 760 million people. They're creating, better said, and then he said 5 or 6 million people could die, and the Chinese government must lift the firewall, let in the CDC, the American CDC, and experts from around the world who he named, who were all sort of pro-Western experts, and overthrow the government. And then they circulated this madness called, the Epoch Times he was citing, which is Falun Gong. Falun Gong is a mad religious sect in America who have got the ear of Donald Trump and his friends and who want to overthrow the government in China. That's what's behind that.
Just agendas cropping up in any situation.
One final point I just wanted to make before. So if you Maxo, I know it sounds dystopian and terrible, but it's just as a clinical methodology. If you were to put everybody in solitary confinement for 3 weeks, the virus would disappear. Right? So that's maximum prison type psychology for eradication. If you wanted herd immunity, well then you had to, and what we know now, for example, that nearly everybody who gets the disease badly is over 50 or over 60 and probably over 80, likely to be dying, 70, 80, like comorbidities. So if you actually, as Boris Johnson once said, protect the old people, and then and stay aware, be aware, whatever, of the rest of it. So the other method would be to allow all the young people, literally all the young people, to catch the virus, and there would be a few cases of deaths, but not many, and protect all the old people, really protect them. That means you go into a care home, everybody's properly masked up, everything's been properly cleaned, everything's been properly protected. So those are the two methods by which you could approach it. So between those two methods, once you have in China, for example, lockdown, and you gather material evidence from the experience in China, you can work out ways in which you can ameliorate that and reduce that. And one of the ways is wearing masks, and that was proven in many, many studies in China. They showed, because they got buses, they got cameras, they got CCTV recorded who got it from whom, and it's been shown that those people who wore the mask were far less like. Well, no, they weren't. They were actually, there was one, for example, case in Wuhan cited in the South China Morning Post, but it was a detailed study of someone on a bus. One person was on a bus, transmitted it to many people. Actually, one of the people sitting next to him didn't get it, who didn't have a mask on. But generally, the people with masks on didn't get it.
Well, to argue that.
And there's a double. Sorry,
there's a lot of noise in this.
One final point on that. Sorry to interrupt you.
I want to talk about others.
I'll let you come in one second. One final point on that is wearing a mask. If you've got the virus and you don't know you've got it, will stop you from transmitting it to others. So that's the other side to that. But anyway, we've done that. You've got your point of view.
Yeah. I mean,
explain.
I would say
5G.
Well, I'll come to that in a second. But the point about the changing of the guidance of the data means that the government or somebody can modify what's going to happen each week, and this is used to brainwash people and alarm and say, oh, lots of cases this week, not next week, and it can change according to the guidance. Now, the consequence of this stuff, scaring people, is this lockdown is a number of things. One is, of course, closing of small and medium enterprises, unemployment. Consequence of that will be takeover by mega corporations and more dependence of workers, unemployed workers, on the state, where they can be easily manipulated to anything else. And that is very bad. Now, what are the things which might come out of that? Well, Bill Gates and others have said they want to carry on these lockdowns until they've got a vaccine, right? Well, they may never get a vaccine anyway, but the point is they stand to make billions and billions and billions out of this. And I would say modern vaccines are suspect you come to as a thing. But that's what I would say.
Comment on that.
Yeah, on what Bill Gates is saying.
Bill Gates. So I know a lot of people who can't stand Bill Gates and think he's up to no good in relation to, you know, the production of vaccines and all the rest of it.
His record in Africa and India is
Personally, I think this is a misunderstanding of the power of Bill Gates. Bill Gates was an enormously powerful, don't forget, he was an enormously powerful individual when Microsoft first launched. Come the age of the internet, he missed the internet basically, he missed out. He didn't think it was going to be a big thing. And so, you know, Steve Jobs and all the Google, Zuckerberg, they took the shine.
Yeah,
once you're a billionaire like Bill Gates, he doesn't give a shit about money. He gives a shit about prestige, authority,
prestige and power.
And power. And certainly his move into Big Pharma and into Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, all the rest of it, has connections all around the world, enables them to do various things. But it's not really, you know, this idea that it's some totalitarian takeover by a couple of big pharma companies, I think is nonsense, to be honest with you. I just think it's pure nonsense.
I'm telling you,
I mean, I remember
actually
they
say they want to have vaccination of everybody. They want it to be forced, and they want to have markers put in you. I mean, microchipping. They've said that.
It is true.
They have said that.
It is true that there are all sorts of tech geeks who come up with all these theoretical solutions,
but they've said that.
such as chipping people and making everybody have vaccination. The truth of the matter is, you know, vaccination. If people take, if 60%, it's like they're saying herd immunity. If 60% of the population get a vaccination, if there is a vaccination, then that would provide some herd immunity. The idea that everybody's going to get, I mean, I know that they're talking about all these things. I know that legislatively the framework has been created. There's no doubt about it.
True, yeah.
The framework has been created all around the world through the legislation and policy measures taken around lockdown and all the associated questions. The framework has been created for a totalitarian state. That's true. That doesn't make a totalitarian.
No, it doesn't. It's a start.
It is a start. It is useful.
It's a bad start.
For our enemies to have the legislative framework to do it. It doesn't mean they can do it.
Large state spending by that method, when the setup is run by mega corporations, is not in any way social.
Well, I mean,
something pretty bad, that's for sure.
True.
Anyway,
look. Okay. Sorry, go on. You carry on.
All right. Back to Bill Gates. He has massive spending in Imperial College, World Health Organization,
They have
and so forth. Lots of stuff, and the BBC.
Yeah.
So, you know, this is exactly the sort of society we don't want. People with big interests like that should not be allowed to take decisions, in my opinion, whereas he is central to decision making and effective corruption.
Money buys power, power buys
right.
influence. You know what I mean? There's nothing new about
Well,
that. You know what I mean? You know, there's nothing new about that. It's a terrible thing, but there's nothing new about it. You know?
But big pharma should not have, and Bill Gates, a monopoly of decision making on the way forward for health of the world.
Well,
and that's what's happening with the World Health Organization.
I mean,
which is known by many people as Bill Gates' WHO.
It is very noticeable that in Britain, for example, the most disgusting thing for me has been the campaign of information dissemination by the government. So these government briefings are the biggest joke on earth.
Oh, they are.
And literally I feel like smashing the screen when I see them, because they're talking out of their backsides every single day.
Yeah.
And the most disgusting thing of all is to when they say we're always guided by the science. I've never heard so much shit in my life. Shit in my life. And
Dr. Boutros says, look, social distancing is nonsense. This is nonsense. He's just spoken against almost everything they do. And he's a very
I mean, I don't agree.
Look, there's many doctors with different views.
Okay.
They're not allowed to speak.
Well, I mean, actually, the problem is slightly different, in my opinion. And that is, if you look at, for example, the medical papers. If you go on Google Scholar, which is the source for finding academic documents, right, and medical documents. If you go on Google Scholar, you'll see, you search up anything on COVID, there are masses of papers on it. And there's no shortage of material on it. The thing is, the governments, in particular the British government, has taken, yes, those two sources, Oxford and Imperial College, and called that the science. And then when they published this Sage Committee investigation, so last week it was only published, because on Monday it was published because an alternative Sage Committee had been created, mostly of lefties actually, and led by this guy David King. So when they suddenly said, oh, we will publish the Sage papers, I looked in these papers, and in February it said in the papers, wearing masks provides protection. Normal level 2 masks, FFP2, which is the sort of standard thing, like effectively like this. They provide protection adequate for medical staff. And then you could get a respirator FFP3, you just buy, and they're 25 quid. From a DIY shop.
Oh, those things.
They're a respirator. It's a proper respirator. It's got basically it's protection against aerosol. So from what I've studied, and I've looked literally at hundreds and hundreds of medical papers in the last couple of months, and there are a number of issues which I've raised here at Speaker's Corner over the last few weeks when I did a little video. One was the evidence from Germany showed that the initial action, which is natural, that they turn around and say, like I say, initially you have to say, what can you do to stop everybody? Right? Just follow my logic, whether you agree or not. Second thing is, having gathered that information, having done that, you look at how you can relax and get away from that. Right? How you can move back to normality.
All decisions like that have leaks in them.
Yes. So firstly, droplets was one thing. Droplets at a very short distance, the most likely. Okay? But in an open environment like this, where the wind is blowing, your droplets are not going to come into my, lungs or throat. Right?
It's perfectly safe to walk around outside. You don't need this stuff at all.
Right.
So the virus dies. The virus is not living things anymore.
Right. Ask yourself,
the virus will.
But if you're in, for example, a tower block, and in that tower block, just like in a ship, the way the disease spread in the ships, if you're in a tower block and you're 20 stories up and you want to come down shopping and everybody's getting in the lift together with everybody else, the chances of you catching the virus in the lift are actually quite high, because you've got everybody inside the
well, there may be. Well, it's the same with the flu every year. No, we're doing an interview.
Doesn't matter. You live together?
You're not social distancing, are you? How much distance you want to throw?
2 metres, as per the regulations.
Well, we're trying to see this.
The open air, I mean, in a bus you don't have distance like that, nor do you guys have distance like that. Sorry? Yeah, I understand you're in a carrier working. I mean, I understand that you've been told social distancing is important, and I understand it. But we're just discussing it. And I'm a doctor, PhD. I've investigated the issues.
I like what you're saying, man.
Sorry?
Thank you. Your news is better than
My
their
doctor's
news.
in political economy.
More real, more authentic.
It has got a lot to do with it, because it's about China. It's about China. It's about. Let me just say something to you, because I noticed when you arrest.
I refuse to leave. So they arrest me.
Well, I mean, look, the fact of the matter is, I don't have any problem with that, but I'm just saying, the problem with the argument you're making is, you guys aren't social distancing yourselves. What? I know, but the social, I know that, but social distancing is about a medical.
Leave him alone, man. It's what we need, man. More real knowledge.
When I saw the video yesterday, it's absolutely fine, absolutely fine.
Of course he should, brother.
they want us to maintain a distance, which is fine. Just do it for the sake of it. But the problem is this: is that when we see this argument about social distancing, I've got you. When we see the argument about social distancing,
Is that all right?
when we see the arguments about social distancing, the same authorities who are supposed to be imposing are not doing it themselves, or they pretend to do it. So the problem is, of course, we've got, for example, Boris Johnson and Matt Hancock telling us how we should behave, when they themselves caught the virus and made no attempt to investigate how they caught it. So it's a complete farce, So, I mean, the police, to be honest with the police I've encountered have been all right? They've not been outrageous, they've been all right, but at the same time, how can you argue this when they're letting people get on buses without any restriction? It's nonsense, That's what's nonsense about the game. And they should be, in my opinion, every police officer inside that van should be wearing a mask. And for example, when they arrested you yesterday, they should have been wearing masks. I mean, the argument of consistency, even if you disagree with wearing masks, they should be wearing masks.
Put masks on when they entered the police station because they noticed they're saying masks and warnings.
Well, I mean, that's what's mad. That's the madness about it. And there are how many people in the van now? They say they're exempt. I mean, now, Boris Johnson said, go to work if you can. So there's going to be thousands and thousands of people tomorrow morning going to work into environments. Who's going to? They're not going to sell police in there, are they? So that's really the trade unions need to take action on that. To be honest with you, because otherwise, how are you possibly going to enforce such regulations if you agree with the regulations? If you don't agree with the regulations, well, that's your. But then the regulations are that. But how are you going to enforce it? Go on, Piers. Give us your
Well,
view.
look, I would say about distancing and people mixing up, that the idea that you stay healthy by isolation is incorrect. You see, children learn immunity by interaction with each other. When you interact, you don't just pick up bad things, you pick up good things as well.
Well, of course.
So and Dr. Boutros made a point that when some of these people come out of isolation, they are going to get ill from many things. They're nothing to do with COVID.
The virus.
Their immunity is going to go down through isolation.
The virus itself, as everybody, as you know,
I think it's grossly overstated.
well, that may be the case, but the overstating is this, in my opinion, and that is the system of society that we live under. Let me just try to put a battery thing. It's going to run out. Yeah.
The police van's gone off.
No, they're over there.
Oh, he's over there. You can probably see some.
He's distancing them, searching them for cannabis or something.
They didn't exist because for years.
Sorry.
And they're wasting
It's a police state operation.
I mean, that's not their intention. They weren't outrageous with us, were they? Come on.
No.
Right? They don't have that many coppers around.
Well, it's
I feel sorry for them because they're actually, a lot of them probably will come down with the virus and infect other people. And they've got this, they've been told that basically they're exempt and that they can all gather together as coppers all over the place together. And that, I think, is dangerous for them. It's been dangerous all along for public sector workers. And that's how it's spread in the hospitals and in the care homes, in my opinion.
Well,
sorry, let me put one point. The general collapse of the capitalist economy underlies the whole process. So now we're being told, or we know now, that there's got 3-4 million unemployed, 36 million unemployed in the United States, 6 million people on the government payroll, furloughed. And so this question about big business taking over small is a big issue. And in my opinion, they should introduce maybe a 6-hour working day, 24-hour working week, generalise the work, share the work out amongst the population, no loss of pay, protect the interests of the workers and the mass of people, instead of protecting the interests of big business and allowing them, enabling them, through giving them money to buy up all the small companies and take over the society. So I think there's a huge issue there. And all these issues, millions unemployed, means, hundreds of thousands of schizophrenics, hundreds of thousands, thousands of suicides. There's no doubt about that.
Well,
and even in the COVID issue, FT reported last week that the delay in treating cancer patients will lead to at least 15,000 additional deaths in cancer. So that's a general thing that is true. You're right.
More people dying because of the isolation, i.e. from cancer, madness, suicide, then are supposedly being saved.
We don't yet have the evidence as to more, but it may be. It may be.
So the best thing now to save lives would be to end the life. And get, I mean, there are certain people who
It doesn't resolve the problem.
Away, maybe.
How does it resolve the problem?
Well,
unless you have some solution, like I
the
said.
NHS can then open up to the people it was not allowed to help us.
Well, firstly, you could only really open up the NHS if all staff were tested once a day, once every few days, or if frontline staff dealing with COVID patients, had already been infected and got immunity.
Well,
and I think the argument
worried about that stuff, you could put cancer patients could go to one hospital and so on.
Well, this is exactly,
plenty of things
and that what they didn't say about what they did in China was, and that's why they controlled it very quickly, was every single person who had the disease and could test it for the disease went into a separate place to everybody else. So they built these hospitals specially for people and centres, especially for people who had got the virus so they wouldn't infect anybody else.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of the virus transmission here took place after they locked down and people went into their homes, spent more time at home and transmitted it into their families.
Well, I know people who went
that's
to
perfectly
hospital
true.
with a shoulder problem and came out with COVID.
Well, that's right.
Or
That's right.
a serious flu.
Yeah.
What happened was I would say it was this particular virus. They recovered completely okay, as will Dr. Beatrice and others said. Anybody who's normally healthy will recover from this.
Well, not anybody. Some people get cytokine storm because the virus is new to the body. The immune system
People
overreacts.
have got low immunity.
Well, no, like that guy Li Wen Liang, whatever his name was, the guy Li Wen. I can't remember his name. Sorry, but the famous whistleblower in China. He got cytokine storm. He's a doctor, he's perfectly healthy. Just the body. Sometimes
numbers,
actually people are quite strong.
The exceptions
That's
to
what
what I
happens.
said are inconsistent.
They are very small. I mean, they are very small numbers. It's true. Funny thing about the whistleblower story is, they all complain about the whistleblower was stopped in China, and now they're saying in the news this week they're saying if doctors say there's not enough PPE, they have to be silenced.
Yeah.
So in Britain we're silencing the doctors and the nurses, threatening them with their jobs and their livelihoods if they report what they do is true.
This situation, whistleblowers on all aspects of the issue should be given front page news on TV and
Front page, because you can just exaggerate
proper
those as
debate.
well.
Well, yes, but as it is, anyone that doesn't fit in with the government narrative is.
I mean, I think it is.
Google and
I think
Facebook. I've had stuff.
Now there's another way. There's another way. Google and Facebook, and I said this.
And Twitter.
I said it at the very beginning. Google and Facebook, in particular Google, but Facebook as well, they know more than the government does about how prevalent Covid-19 is, because everyone types in stuff on their computer. If you think you're coming down ill, you're going to write to your mate and say, "Oh, I think I'm really coming down. I've got a chest, blah blah blah." Friends are going to say, "Oh, you sure you're all right?" Blah blah. So that communication allows Google to know pretty much accurately, from assessing what they do and how they respond and how they react and how long the disease lasts and so on, what communications they have. They will know actually far more closely than any national government would know how it's spread, and therefore they, for example, Google, could have utilised that data in order to control the virus in a much more precise way than any general lockdown would do. But of course they were pretending, oh, we're defending the free speech and so on, which don't forget, they were passing all that data to the NSA a couple of years ago, which Ed Snowden revealed.
I think if you put hashtag Bill Gates of hell, you're likely to.
Yes, I really think
Twitter,
it's the sort of
suppressed.
yeah, but why do you need to say Bill
Well,
Gates?
I'm just trying to assess what monitors they've been using.
Oh yeah, that's pretty. But it
Well,
can be much.
Bill Gates, look.
I mean, I posted something on Facebook. Can't remember what it was, but it was a medical document, and that I got a community warning. You can't post it. So it shows that Facebook has basically come under
They've got
control of some regulations
buzzwords.
and restrictions that have prevented them from.
Back to Bill Gates and his viruses. Look, the facts are that when he's done various things in Guinea-Bissau, other bits of Africa, India, that children have been dying because of his vaccine. In Guinea-Bissau, for example, They did two groups. It was a vaccine against diphtheria. And it had various things added into it. It probably did work against diphtheria, but the death rate of those who had the vaccine subsequently was 10 times that of those who hadn't had it, because their immune systems had been damaged by mercury stuff, formaldehyde, whatever.
There have been instances in history of vaccines going wrong. Right, we all know.
Well, wait a minute.
Right?
I want to
We all
say
know
something about it. There's different things to understand about modern and past vaccines. But the other very important example is India, where Gates did a lot of stuff in India and is now banned from there. They don't want him back, they don't want any more of this.
I mean, I'm not a fan of Bill Gates, but to demonise and make out that he's some, you know, like an Illuminati, it just plays into the hands of the stupidity. You know, Bill Gates is a multi-billionaire trying to make dosh out of whatever he can. And one of the ways he's been doing this, one of the ways he's been doing this is this.
Well,
I'm not. I'm just saying. The problem is that once you feed into this narrative, this guy did that. Yes, they do those things. I mean, Boris Johnson. I would say Boris Johnson now is responsible for the deaths in Britain, right? Hancock is responsible for the deaths in Britain. So. And Sadiq Khan, by the way, because Sadiq Khan was saying to everybody, get on the tube, it's perfectly all right. Now he turns around and says, you've got to wear a mask when you get on the tube, right? So, you know, these are schizophrenics, and the presentation of the message has been schizophrenic all along. So that's fine, but to focus on the Bill Gates issue, I think, is a misunderstanding of what's going on. But I do agree there's a general collapse of capitalism, and that's...
We're talking about all these things.
Okay, go on, far away. You're next.
Current vaccines and previous vaccines. Current modern vaccines are different. The previous vaccine was what we call a natural vaccine. I had, to get rid of smallpox or to guard against it, you're given cowpox. You're given cowpox, they scratch your skin, stick it on, and
in fact, they did it in China. They did it in China for hundreds of years. They used to take the smallpox and put it in the nose of the children.
Of course. But these modern vaccines have got many things added in them. Ground up fetal tissue,
maybe.
Formaldehyde.
Well, but the only thing is, there's at least 100 different programs to make vaccines at the moment, right? And the final one that comes out, well, you don't know what it will be. It may not have anything to do with Bill Gates.
I'll refuse it. I will not have it.
Well, that's fine. I mean,
absolutely.
But on the other, when I was a kid,
against forced vaccination.
Right, but when I was a kid, for example, if you wanted to go to Malaysia, you had to have an international World Health Organization yellow card that showed you'd been vaccinated for typhoid and
when you were a kid
smallpox.
Safer than now, where you've got all these
Wasn't thalidomide also a vaccination?
Yeah.
So I mean, there are cases of this thing, measles and so on. But I tend to think that this plays.
It wasn't a thalidomide thing.
But I tend to think
the natural thalidomide.
The anti-vax thing tends to be based on the sort of new age hippie brigade, who, are in general rejection of modern society, in my opinion, and therefore they tend to be.
Maybe not. But look, you just have to look at the facts instead of the vaccines. Well, many doctors say that modern vaccines historically, and I think that it's very important.
I'm not in favour of forced vaccination, but if a country says you can only come into our country if you've got a vaccination, I think that's a legitimate right of that country to do so.
I would say,
or you have a quarantine. Like my dad just spent 14 days in quarantine. Right? He went to Malaysia. He was in New Zealand. He went back to Malaysia where he lives. And when he got to Malaysia, he stayed in a hotel room for 2 weeks, totally isolated in that hotel room for 2 weeks. So I don't have any problem with that either. I think that's, at the moment, I think it's the right thing to do.
Precautions like that, countries, that's not forcing something into the body.
No, I mean, that's the alternative. You could either say vaccination or quarantine.
There's other cures. Chloroquine and zinc are shown to work for people who've been registered with COVID.
So I mean,
that if there's an alternative, do it.
Okay, so
but those things are being suppressed.
Well, that's reasonable. I mean,
I'm not talking about
I don't not so sure about the hydrochloroquine.
Big pharma want.
From what I've read, it's not as certain as it. But they have used it in many places. They have used it in many places. There are various things that have been beneficial. Not only hydrochloroquine. I mean, Chinese traditional medicine advocates said they had a role in trying to cure people. Interferon B, which is made by the Cubans and invented by the Cubans, that was also significant. But For example, when the HIV virus first came, the initial government, you may remember the initial government, I mean I was a young man at the time and it was very disruptive to my life. The initial government thing was basically stay with one partner for life, never have sex again, right? That was what they said, right? And people got paranoid, right? And they sent this thing through the door and everyone received the leaflet and it had a gravestone on it and it said AIDS, you know, will kill you basically, you know. So therefore you must stay with one partner for life, never change partner. And this was madness. But at the same time, the initial reaction was that you could catch it. And I remember sitting in, it was 1985. 1985, I was at a party in Paris and it was a protest demonstration and we all sat around having drinks. And then we put down our glasses and for a moment no one knew drink was drink. And someone said, oh, who was that my glass? And then suddenly the whole room was in paranoia. You could see literally their brains going, she's got anything, because it was like that. So we've had the same process take place here on a much bigger global scale. But to be fair now, anyone who's got AIDS, if you get the drugs, you don't die from it. In fact, not only you don't die from it, you can't even pass the virus on because you get it at such a low level. And the viral load in this disease is also different. Anyway, well, I'll come on to that a little bit. Anything else you want to say?
Yes, about 5G and the connections or not.
Okay.
With well, before that though, there's one other thing. Sorry. Cashless society, which is another agenda being brought in on the back of paranoia about, oh my God, there's a pound note here.
Well, that's an excuse, but having said that, the cashless society was coming anyway. Like,
yes.
I've been in China, no one uses cash. No one uses
You
cash.
see,
It just
cashless
speeds it up.
society is total wrong.
So the what?
Monitoring, because all the data of your card is... Well, it is.
Well, okay, yes, in a way, yes, you're right. I mean, it facilitates. For example, if I go shopping in Sainsbury's and I pay with my, if I'm paying with my debit card, then they've got data about me that enables them. And of course, the world nowadays, basically,
oh, this guy with that number, we know what he's like.
data is wealth now. That's right, data is wealth now. I mean, even this video will be giving data. Whoever watches it, they'll be monitoring, controlling social distancing. They'll be monitoring, controlling. You know, what type of people watch it, what they say, and so on. And so there's some validity to the idea that
Social distance saves lives. Get yourselves apart from each other. Stand there.
well, I mean, in a way, I mean, one of the problems was this, when they had these signs up saying, stay at home, protect the NHS, save lives, right? And actually staying at home, we now know, and the government even admitted it, was never going to protect anyone's life.
According to Professor John Lee, it's made things worse because it prevents herd immunity.
Well, the herd immunity is another issue. That's a reasonable issue to take up.
Mask actually creates bacteria and
Well, we've heard that as well. We've discussed that already. But he agrees with you. I don't agree with you. I've got my mask, right?
Oh, two against one.
But
you're out now, so you're contradicting yourself.
no, I'm not contradicting myself. I'm saying the open air. You, like the copper coming past and saying social
They're
distance.
hypocrites.
1 minute, the copper come. Hang on. They are just doing their job actually.
Doing their job, yeah.
Yes, they
He's
are.
got a beard, that's
Well,
all.
you might not agree with it, but they are. But social distancing in this circumstance, where we're standing like this, there's no possibility, or almost no possibility, that we can transmit the virus. So when they started out,
Well, I've got vitamin C.
when they started out the campaign, and they said to people, don't come to the park, don't go to the Yorkshire Dales, that was bullshit, right? It was bullshit.
Most of it's bullshit. You get a flu. How are we supposed to do social distance?
Well, it's not bullshit for someone who's. It's not bullshit. It's not bullshit for someone whose family members die, is it?
The police can't get it. The police can't get it, but you can. Now,
Well, all right,
in
that's
the
another
policeman's
issue.
head, this makes sense. The fact that they're going around all
That's another issue.
makes sense
Well,
in
then-
a pauper's head. But I'll take you. They are police, so have heart. They are police.
Well, I mean, I do think it's a bit exaggerated though, because for example, when Extinction Rebellion protests took place, they didn't have enough police. They showed.
Victims in Rotherham.
1 minute.
100,000 victims in Rotherham that are only doing their job.
In what?
Police were only doing their job, overlooking child abuse for 20 odd fucking years.
Oh,
Do me
that's a
favour.
different issue than we're talking
It's
about
a very,
here
very
now.
important issue. If I could shout
That's
to
a completely. It's got nothing to do with the discussion we're having now.
Yes, I avoid the issue.
No, it's not about avoiding the issue. We're talking about
We're
the
doing a lot of
virus,
interview about
global politics, global economics. We're not talking about
The
Rotherham.
fact is that
You want to talk about
viruses
Rotherham?
mutate.
Okay.
Viruses mutate. A lot of viruses
Yes.
are spread by animals,
Yes.
spread by the air.
Yes.
But above all, you've got a thing called immunity. Your immunity, you create antibodies, you create
Good,
antigens.
yes, fine, fine.
In the same way as you might have
Fine.
been given a polio vaccination as a child, you
Fine.
create antigens.
Fine.
But by keeping yourself in bubble wrap, you don't do your immune system any good.
I didn't deny that. I said what I was saying.
How many prisoners do you think we've got that have got it? Zero.
How many what?
Because there's herd immunity.
How many what?
Prisoners.
I'm sorry, you're talking rubbish.
Okay,
You are talking rubbish. Well, I mean, it doesn't matter. You can talk rubbish about something, but you are talking rubbish. There are a lot of prisoners got it. A lot of prison officers got it.
tell me where.
Oh, I don't have the list on me, but you could. It'd take you 5 seconds to look it up online. For God's sake, my friend. You know. You what?
Only working places.
How can you actually say
Work in what place?
How can you actually say
Work
in
in what
prisons
place?
it's herd
Hang on.
immunity?
Work in what
So
place?
if it's herd immunity and
Work in
everybody
what
gets
place?
it, nobody dies,
If you're saying you work in a prison,
you're talking absolute
how many
rubbish,
people?
mate.
How many people were tested
You
in
would
your prison?
you just wait on? You've said about prisons, talking about herd immunity. So if everybody gets it in prisons, yeah, which herd immunity is, nobody dies from it.
So how many people got it in your prison? How many tests?
So how's it herd immunity?
How many
Herd
tests were done?
immunity is when
How
everybody
many
gets
tests
it.
were done?
For
How
fuck's
many
sake.
tests were done? So how can you say there's herd immunity then? You're talking out your backside.
You just talk. You've just
You've got to know,
absolutely
got the
talk-
evidence for your argument, haven't you? For God's sake.
I can't believe what I've just fucking heard.
There's the speaker's code.
Sorry, you was the G. On the question, well, I think we'll finish on this one question.
5G, yeah.
5G. So both of us going to say something about 5G, and then we're going to call the meeting to an end for today. Fire away, your 5G arguments.
Yeah, the first thing to understand is that the COVID virus, whatever it is, whatever its origin, whatever COVID is, it does affect the blood. It's a blood disorder, and it means the hemoglobin doesn't work properly, so then it affects, when it gets worse, all organs. In particular, it will always affect both lungs. And general weakening. Now, when you have 5G, or in fact all electromagnetic radiation, but especially high frequencies, there is many studies which show it is damaging to the immunity system and to fertility. And here we have, for example, an 85-page document here with over 300 references of harmful effects of radiation. Now, these things are generally speaking suppressed by the World Health Organization, who just say things like, oh, well, the heating effect isn't much, therefore it doesn't matter. Now, that's like saying smoking a cigarette, heating effect isn't much, therefore it doesn't matter. I would say the telecom industry are the new tobacco lobby, if you like. They are manipulating and concealing data because they want to sell 5G and 4G, and it is damaging. And
Linked to COVID?
The link to COVID is it also affects, like COVID, many organs, especially the higher frequency, will affect the more organs. So, and it reduces the immunity. So if you've got COVID or someone who's got reduced immunity because of 4G, 5G, then it will get worse.
What
and
percentage
vice versa.
do you reckon it reduces the immunity by?
Well, it depends how much you have, but some people do get very sick from 4G and 5G, and you can read these studies in here.
Well, I mean,
So
I've
I
seen.
would say they mutually enhance each other. And I would say that that means for schools, for example, because children are more, this study showed that, children are more susceptible to 4G, 5G radiation issues. Schools should not have cameras that live, within 400 yards or something. If there's any schools with that, and a lot have been put up recently during the COVID-19, but those should be taken down if those schools are damaged. So I would say the connection between 4G or 5G, because 5G oppose electromagnetic radiation and COVID enhanced symptoms.
I mean,
Should limit, reduce the amount of 4G, 5G and oppose the setting up of any 5G. Which are also, of course, massive operations for surveillance and so on, which is a related issue in terms of the 5G, but not.
I don't think there's actually very strong evidence that 5G does these things, but nevertheless, you know, hang on, just because it's in one document doesn't mean it's true.
No, it's
I have
300 references.
give me fair. I have looked into this to the degree I could. I looked on Google Scholar. I looked on medical. There are a couple of sites that talk about how bad 5G is, but in general, I don't think it's very convincing. But it could be true. I don't know that it might be bad for health. But I don't think that even your argument there is very strong, because if you're saying it weakens the immune system, well, like this guy going bike riding strengthens his immune system. So maybe if he goes bike riding 1 hour a day and has 5G, it's not going to make any difference, right? And there's no connection necessarily between that and the spread of COVID, right? So, and next thing is you could test this by looking at cities that have actually got large amounts of 5G. You can examine the health consequences in those cities and see whether it spreads more rapidly. Most of the people, for example, in Lombardy, they didn't have 5G in Lombardy at the time, and yet they had very high death rates.
Well, I've seen
We've
studies
got
which-
barely any 5G in London,
But
yet
for
we've
that-
got one of the highest city death rates in the world. We've hardly got any in London.
Well, no,
Which even 4G you can't even pick up, right? Half the time. I've got a free account,
Your phone-
4G a year and a half, can't pick it up half the time.
most
Down
phones
to
now are
3G.
4G, most phones.
Now, the issue about 5G, however, there is a true issue in 5G in my opinion, and that is as follows. 5G is designed to provide the infrastructure for what's called the fourth industrial revolution. Fourth industrial revolution is a technological leap to something they call the Internet of Things. It allows you basically in real time, to move objects, to make them act on behalf of man or a company or whatever, to fly a drone, for example, or switch what happens on your television, or do this type of Alexa thing, or even carry out real-time microsurgery on someone in Papua New Guinea from an office or a hospital in London. So that's why autonomous vehicles, autonomous drones, all those things are founded upon 5G and dependent upon 5G infrastructure, because that's what provides them with the communication messaging that makes the machines work. Right? So just the same as this works because I've got 4G on this that lets me transmit video in real time or nearly real time. So 5G is the next level up that is actual real time. That's what 5G is, right? So why is it important? Because now 36 million people unemployed in America, a third of the workforce in Britain working from home, 3 million people probably unemployed in Britain already, 6.5 million people on the pay of the government, right? The economy has collapsed more than in the last 300 years in the last 2 months. And it's not because of COVID. It's because capitalism is a system of production for profit. The profit rate had been tanking. And because the profit rate is low, the companies stop investing. So then, to get out of this crisis in 2008, the government gave money to the banks to bail out the banks and big business. But there again, it was a profit crisis, not a banking crisis. They pretended it was a banking crisis, but it was a systemic crisis of the very nature of the society we live in. So if you like, the machine, there was actually quite a good video, I don't know who made it, but quite a good video. They said, the machine is on and it's never been turned off before. And we've now turned it off. And no one knows how to restart it. And so what they've done is, the Chancellor of the Exchequer in Britain, he took £350,000 million, more than Corbyn ever said he'd spend. His brother, by the way. And when they did this, the £350 billion, less than a third of it has gone to the masses. 2/3 of it has gone to the giant corporates. And they will use this to try and introduce the the fourth industrial revolution as a mechanism for accumulating more profits. Just like if Apple brings out a new phone, people buy that, and if they got a new technology on there, people will rush to get that and therefore wipe out the competition. That's what's happening in the marketplace as far as capitalism is concerned. They're using the new technology to transform the economy in ways that COVID has allowed them to do, and to install control by big capital over the rest of the population. That's the real game going on in the background that they're not talking about. And when they say talking about the science, they're talking about their bloody arseholes of science. There is no British science. Science is a global treasure of human knowledge. There is no national stamp to it. The British government is every day claiming it has got a national stamp. We're financing Oxford University to find a cure, find a vaccine. Agree or not? There's 100 different projects in the world to fund a vaccine. So you need a world programme, not a national programme. And it's the national programme that's landed us as the biggest, highest death rate in the world in reality. Because America's got a much higher population. That's the truth. And here we have 50,000 or so dead because of their policies. No doubt about it. Think about it. In the past, they used to, one aeroplane crash with 5 British people on board. They have a front page news. Plane crashed in Australia, 3 Britons on board. And then they'll fly out there and examine it. A couple of days ago, I saw that Matt Hancock, I'm going to mispronounce his name, starting with a W. Matt Hancock, he turns around and says, sadly, 335 people died today. Let's move on to the next question then. So every day you've got hundreds of dead, and these people turn around and think like, terribly sad they died. And next question, and then the journalists ask questions like a bunch of sycophantic idiots, and they turn around and say, the journalists turn around and say, well, are you certain about this? Have you made sure? There's no real questioning. That's why I'm down here today, because the media are not challenging anything. Whether I agree with Piers or not, well, I don't agree with that. But whether I agree with Piers or not, we need science monitored, observed, investigated, checked up on by the people. The people must be able to monitor the information. They don't provide us with the science. They're telling us the science gets presented at the SAGE meeting, then the government decides what to do. Yet we don't know what was presented in the details at the SAGE meeting. So it's all secret.
See, we've got to have independent monitoring.
They should publish.
And everything in the NHS,
yes.
All the deaths and allocation of cause of death should be done independently, not by the internal operation.
And they should publish in English all the scientific reviews around the world as well. So we know what the Germans have done. I mean, I watch the German stuff. Germany, they have 3-4 virologists, all experts, have got radio programs that explain what's going on.
A lot of these scientists do work internationally, but the government doesn't.
Well, I mean, I heard them, and they said, well, we had one phone call with the Robert Koch Institute yesterday. One phone call. They're broadcasting every day 5-6 hours, and they've got scientists working on this all day, every day. So that the information's there, but they're not spreading it around, not passing it around. Anyway, one final word.
Back to 5G then, I would say I agree that, I didn't talk about Internet of Things, but I agree with you completely, that is a spy operation and, a big capital saving operation, who knows.
It's also a battle between China and America.
So I oppose 5G on 2 grounds. One is the Internet of Things, and secondly, the illness and magnification of 5G and weakening immunity systems. And there is loads of studies which are suppressed, and the modern 5G industry are a new tobacco which is hiding for their own use.
Okay, I've made my point of view on that. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We have a small little group, all socially distancing properly at Speaker's Corner. Thank you very much, and we will be back again in future.
There's no clear picture about 5G and its effects on people.
I agree with you, I agree. But anyway, this is another argument.
There's plenty of literature which doesn't get